Thank you. Thank you very much for having me make this presentation to the audience. The theme of the conference, I think, for just matter of refreshing our minds, is on community development, our connectedness, resilience, and empowerment. I've been tasked to make a presentation on community development and resilience. And I think this is an excellent opportunity for interaction, an excellent opportunity for us to be able to learn many of the things that would be presented in this short presentation. Next. I begin by defining the word community, defining it because it is actually very difficult to define the concept of community, or actually to get one fit-it-all definition of the word community, because the word community has had many definitions. For example, Hillary has found fewer than 94 definitions of community, which with only one common element, however, all the definitions were actually dealing with people. Now, with a multitude of definitions, it becomes very difficult, for example, to have a moot point in terms of understanding what a community really is. However, in this key speech, I would want to define it as a social unit with commonalities, such as a feeling of some sense of interpersonal connectedness that is defined by norms, our religions, the values that we share together, the customs and traditions, the interests, and also the identity. I would want also, we look at communities as a sense of place where, for example, geographically we find ourselves. It can be a country, it can be a county, it can be a village community, it can be a town, or maybe virtual space, especially within the social media. We have different communities interacting in many aspects of development. But finally, also, I want us to look at community as a place where there is a common resource base, a common resource which is being shared. The common resource defines our common livelihood. It can be an ocean, it can be a lake, it can be land where we share a common resource base and be able to propel our daily livelihoods. Next. So from the definition of the community, we would want to know who is a community member. I think it is important not just to look at the definition and then forget about the membership. It is important also to ventilate on the membership of a community. So a community member, these are the people, these are the individuals who are at the core of communities. And community members are those who live in that particular geographical space, are those who learn, there are those who work in that particular area, those who play together, or even those community members also can assume some form of formal leadership. They can have roles that they play that can help the community organize, or they can be friends and they can work together and get things done. So community members, therefore, are part of our social capital. And we know social capital is very important. For example, social capital is important for bonding. Social capital is important for our linkages. And social capital can also be important for creating a bridge for us in life. So as we move towards resiliency, social capital is very important. It's important because it helps us bridge one profession to another, or one activity to another, or one opportunity to another. It also gives us a linkage to opportunities that are available, and also it is good for bonding. People can bond, and in the process of bonding, they can deal with many psychosocial challenges. Next. Let us see that when we talk of community, there are different types of communities. I think it is important that before we deepen the discussion on resilience, we know the different types of communities. And of course, the purpose of having the different types of communities is to bring people together so that we have the we feelings. So you can have communities that are brought together on the basis of interest. They can be professional communities of social workers. It can be brought together by action that we do together to tackle a certain problem that faces all of us. It can be a community that is defined in terms of the place, location, where the community is located, or the practice that they do. Or maybe even we classify communities on the basis of status, where we can talk, for example, of urban communities, even we can talk of suburban communities, even talk of rural community. Therefore, community is important because it gives us a sense of part of something greater than ourselves. It makes us feel part and parcel of the society, space for linkages, spaces for interaction and the interconnection between people of different needs. Because communities help us reach out our goals. Every community, every person has goals. The community therefore gives us that sense of purpose to be able to attain our goals. But much more important, communities makes us feel safe, and they also make us feel secure. When you live in a community of people, community of colleagues, professionals, of neighbors, you feel safe and you feel secure. And this has a lot of contribution in terms of how we build our resilience when we have challenges and adversities that we face in the course of our lives. Next. So from the types of communities, then it is important also for us to know whether there is a good and a bad community. A community is good also with regard to safety and security. How secure, how safe are you in that particular community? A community which is not safe and secure is not a good community. Communities should be able to instill in us confidence, should be able to instill in us the sense of prosperity, the sense of happy place to live, a happy place that you would always be there and you would miss it when you are away. It gives us the freedom, the opportunity to get out of poverty, opportunity to get out of crime. And of course, community is also a place where provides us with high quality of life so that we can be able to live together and be able to enjoy the goodies of life. So communities therefore promote open, participatory processes that actually are very good in ensuring that we build on our cultures, in ensuring that we have intergenerational and transgenerational learning so that we can be able to, in a way, provide some succession for future generation. So good communities and bad communities, those are the characteristics. Next. From the characteristics of what you consider, then we must look at the functions of a community. It is very clear that communities have key functions. One, production. Two, communities also participate in distribution. And of course, communities are very good for consumption. Those who are doing business, those who are producing, they need consumers. They are found in communities. So the triple functions of communities are very critical for us to understand: production, distribution, and consumption. But what more important for us as social scientists is the socialization. Community is very good for socialization. In Africa here, we say it takes a village to raise a child. You don't raise a child on your own alone, but the whole village is required to input so that you can have a holistic child who is very well developed and well productive to societal engagement. But much more critical is the function of social control. Communities also provide opportunities for social participation. And what is more important for this presentation, they provide mutual support. And mutual support is very key when it comes to talking about resilience, because resilience will require in some way some kind of mutual support. Next. What is community development? Now we are arriving where we wanted to reach. We saw what is a community, what makes a good community, etc. Now, community development, as defined by the United Nations in 2014, previous slides, come together to take collective action and to generate solutions when you come together to be able to generate common solutions. Taylor and Allison, 2011, they are saying that community development actually is a practice. It is a practice that is based on a profession and, of course, an academic discipline that promotes participatory democracy, that promotes sustainable development within the framework of Agenda 2030 on sustainable development, promotes rights of the people, promotes economic all issues of inclusion, social justice through organization, through education, and through empowerment of people. These people, local or cultural identities, based on interests, whether based on locality or status, whether urban or rural community. The broader concept, therefore, applies to practices of civil leaders, activists that are involved in development issues, professionals, all of them engaging in improving various aspects of human life, improving gender issues, improving ethnic issues, improving issues that have to do with corruption, creation of jobs, etc., etc. So typically, therefore, community development is aimed at creating or building a stronger and a more resilient local communities. And the resilience part of it is what we are really going to focus on going forward. Next. Ken 2007 says that community development is a holistic approach. Holistic, the word holistic is very important. Holistic approach, which is grounded in certain principles. And he outlines those principles as one, empowerment. The principle of empowerment is very key to community development. Human rights. The principle of inclusion, which is one of the biggest agenda for the sustainable development goals. But of course, self-determination, social justice, and of course, collective action. So in the idea of collective action, you can find that many issues and many cases of community resilience can be built on the basis of identification of a common problem, whether it is a social injustice, whether it is a question of exclusion, whether it's a question of human rights violation, or it's a question of, gender discrimination, so that we can be able to collectively address it as a community. We address it together as a common platform, as a common solution. Next. Community development work. We don't just talk of community development, but it involves certain work that we need to do. So community development work involves community development workers. And community development workers, their work is to help communities help themselves. Just like in social work, community development work is very close, helping people to help themselves. We don't act in a philanthropic manner by giving people fish. Community developers, like social workers, help communities to help themselves by teaching them, by building capacity so that they can be able sustainably on their own, be able to be resilient, be able to adapt to an adversity, and be able to move forward. It is a profession that works alongside troubled communities. Community development work is very key in communities that are in adversities, in communities that are troubled, for one, to inspire them, to provide an inspiration out of the challenge. Two, support them as they build resilience, as they adapt to difficult situations. And of course, three, offering those communities guidance, offering those communities opportunities that they can use to initiate social change, that they can use to make improvements to their own community. They can make these improvements through planning services. They can make these improvements through self-help groups, like, saving groups and learning groups, merry-go-round groups, running support and social action groups, building community networks, which are very important for resilience building, participating in interagency activities. So these are the key components of community work, to be able to help the community really adapt to challenges and adversities of life. It can be disease-related like COVID-19, it can be pandemics, outbreaks, but it can also be disasters and other development activities. Next. Now, community development work has got a methodology, and it has also got concerns. The methodology is very clear from the diagram on my left. You can see that there are a number of steps that are embedded in the community development methodology. But key to this methodology is identification of a problem. Within the community must identify an aspect as being a problem that is affecting everybody in the community. Once that problem is identified, what follows is identifying stakeholders, who can play which role to be able to solve the problem. And after we identify the stakeholders, the other identification is of strategies. What strategies can we put in place? What methods, what mechanisms can we employ to solve the problem? From identification of the strategies then is to identify the resources that are needed. What are resources needed? Human resources needed, physical resources needed, financial resources needed that go along with budgeting. Then implement action. We implement and then we evaluate what we implement to be able to either resolve or to be able to know whether we have not resolved. So when we resolve, we create opportunity to disseminate our success stories. When we don't resolve, definitely it is an opportunity for feedback so that we do certain modification of our intervention, certain modification of our implementation, so that we make new choices, so that we also make reflections and we come up with the new actions and we plan afresh. Now you can see the flow of the methodology from identification all the way to dissemination or all the way to modification of intervention, depending on whether we solve or we don't solve the problem. And the concerns of community development are also captured very well when one looks at the sustainable development goals. For example, the whole question of poverty, for example, the whole question of good health, for example, quality education, gender issues, environment, energy, etc., etc. All these are concerns of community development workers, and they are concerns for the world. So community development workers are also having at the heart the concerns of the Global Agenda 2030. Next. Resilience now. Now we know what is a community, who is a community member, and what is a good community, and what is community development work. Resilience is a field, an aspect, a concept that was developed in the field of psychology. And resilience actually is a process of adaptation. In the face of adversity, human beings have to adapt. In psychology, people have to adapt to trauma. People have to adapt to tragedy, threats, or any significant source of stress. It can be family stress. It can be serious health problem or stress that's generated by serious health problems. It can be workplace or even financial stressors. We need to adapt, and that process of adaptation is what we call resilience. So community development experts also borrowed this concept, and they defined resilience as the sustained ability of communities to withstand, adapt to, and recover from adversity. So as community development experts ourselves, as that sustainable ability that communities have to be able to withstand adversity, to be able to adapt to adversity, or even recover adversity. If COVID-19 is our adversity, how do we withstand COVID-19 as a community? How have we adapted to it? Washing hands, putting masks, etc., etc. How do we recover? Economies and the world have been affected by COVID-19. So recovery is part of resilience. How do we recover from COVID-19? Thus, therefore, issues of health challenges, physical, behavioral, social, and even environmental, they are part and parcel of overall resilience. We need some physical adaptation, we need behavioral adaptation, we need social adaptation, even environmental adaptation. So resilience, therefore, is the ability to withstand adversity. To put it very simply, the ability to withstand adversity and bounce back from a very difficult situation. How is the world going to bounce back from the situation of COVID-19? How has West Africa, for example, been bouncing back from situations of Ebola? That withstanding adversity and bouncing back is the one we call resilience, and we need to build, therefore, resilient communities. It is important because it gives people the strength needed to process and overcome hardships. So resilience gives us the hope, the strength that we need so that we can be able to overcome hardship. So resilience is very important, and it is very key in community development. Next. There are 6 domains of resilience that we need to know. The first domain of resilience is vision. Vision is the most important domain. Vision is about sense of purpose. Composure. Composure is about regulating emotions. During times of adversities, emotions are very high. People get emotionally distracted, and therefore it is important that people adapt to emotional challenges. Of course, the other domain is reasoning. When we are faced with a problem as a community, we must step back. We must, develop enough shock absorbers so that we can anticipate and so that we can plan. We identify the problem and we plan on how to solve the problem. Tenacity is another domain. Persistency, they say, is the key. When you persist, trying to tackle or trying to provide a solution to a problem, definitely somehow you will find light at the end of the tunnel. Collaboration. Even Agenda 2030 itself recognizes partnerships and collaborations as very important. We cannot solve problems that befell the community individually, but we must collaborate so that we can be able to move together. While the 6th domain of resilience is health, health is actually the foundational domain, because the community must be healthy so that that community can be able to deal with the challenges befitting it. But all these domains revolve around 5 pillars. At individual level, we must be mindful of others, mindful of others, so that we are not too selfish. We become a little bit altruistic and supportive to others. Self-care, because you cannot be able to provide care to other people if you cannot be able to have self-care yourself. Then, of course, we need to develop positive relationships, so that relationships that are building, not relationships that are destructive. And therefore, finally, we need to have a purpose, a sense of purpose. And these 7 C's of resilience, I'll go through them quickly. They were proposed by Ginsburg. 2013, Ginsburg was a child pediatrician and a human development expert. 1 is competence. Confidence, number 2, you must be competent and you must have a certain level of confidence. Connection, these are networks, linkages. Character, very important. You cannot be very resilient and your character is questionable. Your character lacks integrity. So ethical considerations are very important. Then contributions, we must contribute from all facets of our professions. We must be able to cope. Coping mechanisms, very important. And of course, we must be in control. Even if there is an adversity, even if the adversity is taking toll on us, we must always be in control. If you feel in control, you'll always find a way out. Next. So community resilience, therefore, is the sustained ability of communities to withstand, adapt to, and recover from problems. As human beings, we need a sense of belonging. That sense of belonging is very important to us. It is core of humanity, actually, and it is what connects us to the many relationships that we develop. We are people who like to share, or human beings like to share, who want to get happy for happiness of others. We want to be happy and we want others to be happy. We are a people that know the true value of friendship, the true value of family, and the true value of happiness. In order to build community resilience, therefore, a community must develop capabilities in the following areas. 1, active engagement of community stakeholders. So participation is very important in event planning, in personal preparedness. We must engage the community. Public participation is very key. 2, development of social networks, social capital. I repeat, very key. Creation of opportunities to improve the physical and psychological well-being of members. Social networks are very, very key because they provide also the social support network that is needed out of an adversity that is affecting the community or out of a problem that affects the community. Next, resilient communities. If you want to know that a community is resilient, during times of threats, during times of adversities, you should be able to look at certain parameters. For example, one, resilient communities have very rich local knowledge. Indigenous knowledge is very important because problems that face communities are not new. Some of them are problems that face those communities long time ago. So local knowledge, indigenous knowledge, community networks, what networks are there? Community relationships, what relationships are there that can be tapped, that can be used to help solve the problem? Communication, very important. We must always communicate, and communicate. The governance structure, the leadership structure is very important. And of course, you need resources to be able to deal with any adversity. You need to be prepared, issues of planning, issues of disaster preparedness, issues of pandemic preparedness, and therefore also mental outlook. I said you must always remain in control. Mental outlook, be in control all the time, no matter how adverse the challenge is. So resilient communities, therefore, have capacities to identify problems. They have capacities to identify priorities, and also they have capacity to act. You must identify what is the problem, and within the problems, you must identify which are the priority problems and act immediately. Resilience communities, therefore, have relationships also with external actors, external stakeholders who can provide support, who can supply goods, who can supply services, who can supply professional input and professional knowledge, and even can supply lessons learned and best practices from other communities that can be used to solve the problem. Next. I want now to go to a personal experience that I want to share in terms of building resilience in communities. I've been working for quite some time now in Kenya in building community resilience in the face of terrorism in Kenya. I've been doing a lot of work together with people guys now in charge of agriculture in Kenya, Professor Mwakimako and Dr. Steve Auma. We have been building resilience based on knowledge because we want to classify that the problem of terrorism started way back in 1980, where there was a terror attack at Norfolk Hotel in 1980 and 20 people were killed. The US Embassy in Kenya bombing, which took place in 1998, where 224 deaths were recorded. The Paradise Hotel bombing, 80 injured, 33 people dead. The Westgate, 2013, 68 deaths. Garissa University attack, the terrorists attacked a university in Kenya in 2015. They killed 180 students. The Mpeketoni attack, 60 deaths. And the recent 2019 Dusit, where 22 deaths were recorded. So based on these terrorist activities, we sat down and found it fit that we must be able to do research. We cannot build resilience without knowledge. We started doing a lot of research, and in this process, we did research on the status of radicalization and violent extremism in Kenya. We looked at the push and pull factors of radicalization. We looked at returnees or defectors, those people who had joined the violent extremist groups and then defected. We looked at the amnesty offer. We looked at management of Islamic institutions because terrorism is an ideological adversity. We looked at the police, preparedness of the police. How is the police relating to the local community? Women. We looked at sheikhs. We looked at the followers of Islamic religion. We looked at narratives and counter-narratives of radicalization, and we looked at recruitment spaces. So we did all these researches in order to build the knowledge. Click. In order to build the knowledge. And therefore, when we had built the knowledge on violent extremism or preventing and countering violent extremism, it was time now to innovate. Click. So we started a discussion with an organization called Human Rights Agenda, Huria. And the discussion in Huria was for Kwale County, where 50 deaths had been registered because of terrorism. And in the discussion with Huria, an idea came in terms of building resilience by coming up with a strategy. In our case, our stakeholder was Huria and the National Counter-Terror Center, NCTC, the National Counter-Terror Center. And then we identified a strategy. And on the basis of this discussion, Kenya was lucky to develop a national counter-violent extremism strategy out of our work. When the Kenya government developed a national counter-violent extremism strategy, we intensified the discussions where we developed county counter-violent extremism action plans, and up together all these efforts into a book, which is already with the editors. And in the process also, we came up with county CVE forums, a forum where people can discuss about violent extremism, stakeholders can come together and discuss. How did we build community resilience? We built community resilience, one, by establishing a national counter-terror strategy. Two, by having county action plans in 47 counties of Kenya. Kenya is divided into 47 counties. As I speak, every county now in Kenya has a CVE action plan. We also managed to develop new organizations. We developed KMDI. KMDI is Kwale Muslim Development Initiative. We also developed another organization called HUDA, Human Development Agenda. We also developed an organization called Al-Azhar for women victims of violent extremism. We had an impact regionally, and we had an impact internationally, because some of the ideas, especially the action plans, have been able to be discussed in council. Next, acknowledge the partners that were involved in this process in building a resilience in Kenya against terror, and specifically in Kwale County. I wish to acknowledge USAID through Human Rights Agenda, HURIA. I wish to acknowledge the British Council, BRICS, Search for Common Ground. I wish to acknowledge Pwani University, my own university, for participating in building resilience against terror in Kenya. With those many remarks, I'd want to conclude by saying communities are where we live. Communities are important in identifying problems that we face collectively, and in designing collective solutions, and in mobilizing community action. It is only through synergy of community that community resilience is built. We must strive, engage, and purpose to build community resilience, because that is the future of handling adversities in the world. Thank you very much.